Yo, what is going on, everybody? Coming at you today with another week 1 rankings video. Did the running backs in my last video. If you didn't see that, go check it out. It'll be tagged at the end of this video. Today we will be doing the wide receivers. These rankings are going to be in half PPR, so then adjust accordingly to your league settings. I'll also only be doing the top 25 today. If you want to see more people, let me know. Or if you have specific start-sit questions, just put those in the comments and I can answer them. Before we actually get into it though, make sure to drop a like on this video, comment anything you want to see, and subscribe to this channel. I got a bunch of content coming this season. Anyways, though, now we can get into it. All right, so my number 1 wide receiver for week 1 is going to be Cooper Kupp. This video is probably getting uploaded on Thursday, so he's playing tonight. They're going up against the Buffalo Bills, and they don't have Tre'Davious White to start the season, which is part of the reason why I have him ranked as the number 1 wide receiver to start it off. Like I said in my last video, these rankings are going to be very similar to the actual redraft rankings with just slight adjustments based on certain situations and certain matchups. Cooper Kupp's going to be my number 1 wide receiver this week. My number 2 wide receiver in week 1 is going to be Justin Jefferson. He's going up against the Green Bay Packers, which is a pretty tough matchup. Going up against Jair Alexander, but he's one of those people that is completely matchup proof. He's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. It's going to be more of a pass-heavy offense, and that game will probably be pretty high scoring. Nothing really to worry about here. We're going to have him in this first tier, obviously. Again, like I said in the last video, these top 10, 12, maybe even 15 guys, like you're kind of just starting them regardless unless you're in some really obscure league. But most of the people that I talk about in the beginning here are going to be kind of just set it and forget it. I'm also going to put Jamar Chase in tier 1 for week 1. Another guy that was kind of in that obvious top 3 for the wide receiver ranking. They're going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a tough matchup. Normally, recently has been a little bit tougher against the run than it is against the pass. So we'll see how that goes. The Bengals are also an elite offense. Jamar Chase is an unreal talent. He's another person you're just going to put in your lineup every single week that he is playing. So don't really have to think too much about him. We're having Jamar Chase here at wide receiver 3. And the last person I'm having in this tier 1 is Devontae Adams. I didn't originally have him in here to start it off, but they're going up against the Chargers, and JC Jackson isn't going to be there for week 1. So I think this game is going to be an absolute shootout, and there's not a number 1 cornerback to go up against Devontae Adams. So I think he's going to get hyper targeted by Derek Carr to just start off the season. And regardless if he's not, he's just going to get wide open where he's going to get the targets regardless. So I think he can be put up into this top tier for week 1. We'll see how it goes on Sunday, but for right now, I'm going to have him in first tier. To start off my second tier, I have Stephon Diggs, who will be playing tonight. He's going up against Jalen Ramsey, which is one of the toughest matchups in the NFL. That's why he's at the start of this next tier and not in the top tier. Josh Allen, though, the Buffalo Bills, an offense that can overcome any defense that they're playing. Stephon Diggs will probably get his, and that's why I have him ranked up here. The other person I have in the second tier is another clear wide receiver 1 for his team. That's going to be CeeDee Lamb. Going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Pretty tough matchup. Another team that's a little bit better against the run than they are against the pass, but with everybody healthy, there's still going to be a really good pass defense. But CeeDee is just one of those guys where his opportunity with Amari Cooper gone and his talent just makes him an elite fantasy option week over week. Now, we haven't really seen him be the alpha number 1 wide receiver for week over week basis. Obviously, we're going to see it this season. I think he definitely can do it. That's why I'm ranking him up here. But actually seeing it on the field is going to be good to see. Going up against Tampa, who also has a good offense, is good for them because they're going to have to keep throwing the ball. Can't just run out the clock. But the matchup holds him from being in the higher tiers. So that's all I have for tier 2. To start off tier 3, I have somebody who might be a little bit higher than some people expect. It's actually going to be Michael Pittman. The Colts are going up against the Houston Texans, which is one of the best matchups for any skill position player. They have the new quarterback with Matt Ryan, who loves to hyper target his wide receiver 1, and there's not a ton of other receiving options. We could see people like Paris Campbell and Alec Pierce kind of get more involved as the season goes on, but this week 1, they're going to want to come out firing. They have an absolutely fantastic matchup with a quarterback who loves to feed his wide receiver 1. So this is kind of the upper echelon where I think he could be ranked as the season goes on, but I think he's well deserving of this spot. He's my wide receiver 7, starting off tier 3. Up next for the wide receiver 8, I have Mike Evans. They're going up against the Dallas Cowboys, which is an interesting defense to talk about because they had some of the most takeaways ever of a defense last year, but at the same time, they gave up a ton of yards. So it's kind of a mixed bag with them. We also don't know at this time if Chris Godwin's going to be playing. He's been a full participant at practice in the most recent report, so there's honestly a good chance at this point, although I imagine he'll be limited if he does play, and that's still up in the air. I think regardless, Mike Evans is going to be a clear wide receiver 1 this year. That's why I have him ranked up here. As I like to say, he is one of the best goal line backs in the league. Next up, we got AJ Brown. He is going up against the Detroit Lions. They have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. I mean, they could be a little bit better this year, but they're still not going to be a good defense, and he can just absolutely dominate them. He's someone too that can just break an 80-yard slant to the house. It's one of the most electric players to watch in the NFL. He's definitely a little bit lower, getting traded to the Eagles with Jalen Hurts, who's kind of a running quarterback, not a great passer, but I think this is such a good matchup that he's going to absolutely dominate it, and they're going to want to feed their new weapon that they got. So I think having him ranked at the wide receiver 9 totally makes sense. Next up is another person who has a pretty good matchup is Deebo Samuel. The Niners are playing the Chicago Bears, so another matchup that they should be able to really dominate, but they just have so many weapons there that it could go really any different way. And also Trey Lance kind of breaking our quarterback. We don't know what that's going to look like, how much they're going to run it, how much Deebo is going to be used in the run game. There's a lot of variables. I'm just worried about putting him in the upper echelon, but he is such a good talent that he has to be ranked like in that top 10 wide receiver range every single week. The last person I have in this tier is Keenan Allen. They're going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, who talked about in my last video is just not a good defense, but they do have a really good offense. So I think this could very likely turn into a shootout, which is going to be great for all the weapons in that Los Angeles and Las Vegas have, is part of the reason why I have Devontae Adams ranked in the first tier. But Keenan Allen is our lead guy with Justin Herbert against a good offense and a bad defense. I mean, that just leads to fantasy success. Keenan Allen, last guy in this tier right here. I have him ranked on my wide receiver 11. My wide receiver 12 to start with the next tier, I have Tyreek Hill. As we all know, he just got traded to the Miami Dolphins, and they're going up against the New England Patriots, who, although they kind of don't have as many weapons on the defensive side of the ball, they are known for kind of scheming out the wide receiver 1 or the number 1 weapon for the team, which is going to be Tyreek Hill, obviously. You know, the person, though, that is just so talented, you have to have him kind of ranked in the wide receiver 1 area. So I think he's a tier below than all of these other guys. He can definitely, you know, break a massive touchdown, but I'm tempering my expectations a little bit for this week. I think once we also see this offense on the field and get an idea of what they're going to look like, we'll be able to gauge exactly where he should be ranked at. So for right now, I have him ranked right here as my wide receiver 12. Next up, I actually have Hollywood Brown as my wide receiver 13. I don't know if some people think this is too high, but there's no DeAndre Hopkins there, and they're going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. So obviously another game that's going to be a shootout. There's also a decent chance that Zach Ertz might not play, so there's not a ton of weapons there besides Hollywood. And as much shit as Kyler gets, like, he's a good quarterback, and he can produce a lot of points and a lot of fantasy points. We've seen it his entire career, and he also has a connection with Hollywood already, so we're going to be able to see that right away. I think he well deserves this spot. He could even finish higher. I think he has more upside than someone like Tyreek Hill. I'm kind of just ranking him below him because of the respect I give to Tyreek. Really excited about him. Like I talked about in my drafts and my ranking video, the first 6 weeks for Marquise Brown is going to be really good for fantasy. So sign me up for him all week. And the last guy I have in this tier is actually Courtland Sutton. They're going to go up against the Seattle Seahawks, who don't have a really good defense. First game of the season, and Russ is playing his old team that he's been with for the last 10 years. I think that they're just going to want to absolutely tear them apart. Also, all the camp reports are saying that Courtland Sutton has been getting all the work, so we'll see if he's actually the clear wide receiver 1. I wasn't so sold on it to start the offseason because if you look at the numbers when Jerry Jeudy played and Courtland Sutton played, Jerry Jeudy actually was way better than him last year. But based on kind of the scheme they run, the style of wide receivers they are, and all the camp reports, it's been pretty clear that Courtland Sutton's a wide receiver 1. And I think that this is a matchup that the Broncos are going to absolutely dominate. So I think having him in this kind of end of the upper echelon of wide receivers is where he should be ranked. So Courtland Sutton to end off this tier, wide receiver 14. Now, my next tier, tier 5, my wide receiver 15, I have T. Higgins. He is going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who like to talk about with Jamar Chase. They are a good defense, but definitely better on the rushing end than they are against the receivers. And the Bengals are an elite offense. T. Higgins is obviously the second weapon here, and he's going to have weeks where he finishes higher than this. I just think for this first week, it's not the best matchup, so he's ranked a little bit lower. But he's not somebody that you're going to bench, so play him with confidence. He's going to be great this entire year. Next up, I have Mike Williams. Kind of a lot of the same things that I said about Keenan Allen going against the Vegas Raiders. Not a good defense. I think it's going to be a shootout. Mike Williams also started the year last year as like a top 5, top 3 wide receiver for the first 6 weeks or so. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. Keenan Allen's definitely the more consistent guy, but there's more upside with Mike Williams. But with that upside, there's a lot more variance as to what can happen. So I have him ranked a little bit lower, but still, you know, wide receiver 16, you're playing him in almost every single league that you have him. And if you're playing him, I would feel very confident about it. After that, I have DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers are going up against the Cleveland Browns. Another kind of revenge game for Baker Mayfield. It'll be interesting to see how they actually utilize everyone, how Baker actually looks, because he looked terrible last year, but he was hurt for a lot of the year. And I think People think he's a lot worse than he actually is, although, he's not an elite quarterback at all. Probably not even like a top 15 quarterback, but he's definitely should have a starting job. Sadly, is probably the best quarterback passing wise that DJ Moore has ever played with. So it'll be interesting to see how he's going to be utilized and how he's going to do. If he can just get over that stupid 4 touchdown threshold, he's going to be great for fantasy because he's an absolute beast. Another guy I have in this tier, my wide receiver 18, is Terry McLaurin. Now, people have gotten lower and lower on him on the offseason, which I get it. Not a great offense. Carson Wentz, although is an upgrade, and again, another person who's sadly the best quarterback he's played with. Not very exciting. Jahan Dotson has looked really good, but Terry McLaurin is an unbelievable wide receiver, and they're going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, so he should be able to dominate this matchup. He's going to get enough targets and receptions where he's going to be at least a wide receiver 2. He's never really been someone with a ton of upside. That's why he's ranked kind of down here, and he doesn't have an elite quarterback to help him out, but he's good enough where he's going to be solid. So feel good about playing him, but definitely don't expect, an elite wide receiver option. The last guy I have ranked in this tier is Allen Robinson. He's on the Los Angeles Rams now. Like I talked about with Cooper Kupp, they're going to go up against the Buffalo Bills with no Tre'Davious White. And I do think that they're going to focus a lot of their attention on Cooper Kupp, which makes a ton of sense. He was a Triple Crown last year for wide receiver. But I think that's obviously going to open up a ton for Allen Robinson, and he could have a fantastic fantasy day. And if you're still out on Allen Robinson, if you go to Matt Harmon's reception perception, you can see that he was still one of the best receivers against man coverage last year and beating it in zone coverage. I mean, Sean McVay can scheme up anything, so there's going to be a ton of opportunity for him. We'll see if Cam Akers is still getting worked back. So there's a lot of things like going well for him. I didn't originally have him ranked here, but after considering it, I think having him in this tier is where he should be. So I'm starting him in the leagues that I have him. I feel great about it. So I just want to give you the confidence if you're worried about starting Allen Robinson this week. Moving on to the last tier, I have Brandon Cooks to start it off. He's on the Texans with Davis Mills. They're going up against the Indianapolis Colts, which the Colts are a really good defense and the Texans are not a good offense. Brandon Cooks is just one of the only options there. He's going to get the targets, and he's just somebody for his entire career has just been extremely consistent week over week, year over year. Just kind of one of those guys who is going to be a back-end wide receiver 2 every single week at least at the worst. I mean, in his prime with Brady and Drew Brees and all of that, obviously he was a wide receiver 1, but even since then, he has always been really good for fantasy. And it only makes sense that their offense is going to get better from last year because it really couldn't get much worse, and he was still good for fantasy last year. So I feel, it's not a sexy pick, it's not a sexy play, but he's going to be good for fantasy, so start him around this range and feel as good as you can feel about starting the wide receiver 20. Next up at the wide receiver 21, I have Jalen Waddle, who is going up against the New England Patriots. Like I talked about with Tyreek Hill, a lot of times they scheme out their wide receiver 1 or their number 1 weapon, which can leave a lot of opportunity for someone like Jalen Waddle. So we could have a good week, but at the same time, going up against the Patriots, they're like to grind out the clock, could limit opportunities. Whole new system. It's really hard to really gauge where it's going to be. We're going to have to see it on the field and what it actually looks like. But he's also fully healthy to go, and the offense should be improved enough where he'll be a back-end wide receiver 2 at the very worst. After that, I have Michael Thomas. He is coming back after basically not playing for the last 2 years, going up against the Atlanta Falcons, who have not been a very good defense in the past couple years. But AJ Terrell, the cornerback, has been really good, and he'll probably have the matchup with Michael Thomas, which could limit him a little bit. But all the reports out of camp are saying that he's basically what he looked like. Obviously, he's not going to be that. He doesn't have Drew Brees. He has Jameis Winston. Chris Olave is also there. But a healthy Michael Thomas is going to at least finish around this area. So if he's healthy, then I'm going to rank him here. One of the most intriguing things to watch this weekend is, what does Michael Thomas actually look like after basically not playing for 2 years? So I'll be keeping my eye on that. I'm sure a lot of other people out there are too. Next, at the wide receiver 23, I have Rashad Bateman going up against the New York Jets. A matchup that the Ravens should absolutely dominate. Like I talked about with Marquise Brown, he has gone from the team. The only other real target there is Mark Andrews, who probably will be the first target. But Lamar having all his weapons again, it's going to be a huge improvement for the offense. Still unsure if J.K. Dobbins will be there for week 1, but I think after everything we saw at the end of last year with Rashad, what he was drafted to be and how good we saw Hollywood in this offense, I think he can easily be a top 25 wide receiver week over week. And with this matchup, they should absolutely dominate it. He could definitely finish a lot higher than that, but obviously with Lamar, there's always a risk of him just kind of rushing in everything and the offense doing that. So it's hard to rank him extremely high because of that, and I want to see it on the field before I rank him there, but I feel very confident about starting him as a top 25 option. Next, at the wide receiver 24, I have Jerry Jeudy. Another good opportunity, good matchup going up against the Seattle Seahawks with Russell Wilson. Like I talked about with Courtland Sutton, there's just a lot of opportunity for them to dominate because I'm sure Russ wants to do that. Everything out of camp, though, like I said, has just been Courtland Sutton's the clear wide receiver 1. Jerry Jeudy hasn't really shown it on the field yet, but he was drafted to be great and, I mean, run some of the crispiest routes in the NFL. And if he's open, Russ is going to get the ball to him. So he's going to have value. I'm really fascinated to see how the target share is actually broken out. It'll obviously take a couple weeks to really see what it's like. But this first week against the Seahawks, I think, will be a good opportunity because they're going to want to put up a lot of points. And the last guy I have ranked inside the top 25 is Darnell Mooney of the Chicago Bears. Going up against San Francisco 49ers. They've been pretty friendly to wide receivers, although they did make some improvements this offseason. There's just nobody else in the Bears offense to target, so he's going to probably get 10 targets almost every single week. And how valuable all those targets, probably not super valuable, but with that volume, he kind of has to be ranked here regardless. Do not think Justin Fields will have a lot of time to throw the ball against that defensive line and their offensive line. So it's going to be after a lot of short dump off passes, but just given that volume, I'm ranking him here. Now, there's a couple other guys that I didn't rank in the top 25 that I want to mention. One of them being Deontay Johnson. He is kind of questionable to play at this point. I'm not sure if it's been decided by the time this video has come out, but if he does play, obviously he'll be ranked here. I think I'll probably put him in this tier 6, though. Just there's so many questions with that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. The other guy that's really interesting is Gabe Davis, because Stephon Diggs is going up against Jalen Ramsey, so there could be a lot of opportunity for him to dominate. So he's somebody who's a more high upside play, and if you have him, I would definitely feel okay starting him because of that reason. If there's anyone else I didn't talk about that you want to know about, just leave it in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, hopefully before this first Thursday night football game. But dude, we made it. Let's go. Thank you if you watched this far. I hope these rankings helped out a little bit. I'll still be dropping my quarterback and tight end rankings before Sunday, so stay tuned for those. I will see y'all there. Later.